You're listening to Get to Know World of Warships, a podcast created by Boggzy and Synpax.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of Get to Know World of Warships. Possibly the last episode. I, of course, am Boggzy. I stopped being Boggzy after I tried to carve a pumpkin with the name Boggzy in it, and I forgot the Z. That then spawned mockery for days and days. And now I'm Boggzy, so... I, of course, am joined by my co-host, Borla. Hello, Borla.
Hey, Boggzy. How are you today?
I'm fine. And in a very, very special twist of events, we have the man himself, Synpax. Hello, Synpax.
Hey, how are you?
I'm doing great, man. Thanks for joining us. It's great to have you here.
Good to be back.
Yeah, well, so, elephant in the room. I work for Wargaming now. I am the enemy. I've made a deal with the devil to improve the quality of my life. And I'm working hard at growing my horns and forked tail. That being said, we sort of talked about the idea of what we would do with the podcast. And it seemed to us that, and I'm going to speak for Borla here because I think I can. You can feel free to correct me, but it sort of seemed that if we tried to continue the podcast while I was working for the company, there would be a certain sort of conflict of interest that might come up, as in the past, even when I was a community contributor, we were able to have sort of full range of opinion on whatever we wanted. And that allowed us freedom to speculate as well on why we think something might be happening or, whatever. And there was a real interesting creative freedom that we had there, but now I oftentimes know the answers to questions that we would often ruminate on for 20, 30 minutes. And, while some things I'm perfectly allowed to share, and other things it's sort of like, no, we don't share that sort of stuff. So we sort of felt like the podcast wouldn't be what it was before. And I think that, well, Borla, maybe I'll let you riff on what I threw out there.
Yeah, I've had a lot of fun doing the podcast with you over the time that we did it. We had lots of good conversation. As you mentioned, a lot of it was our personal opinions of what was going on in the game. Both of us, I would say, were probably more pro wargaming than much of the stuff that goes on in the forums and Reddit and so on. But we did have our criticisms or questions, and I think that was an important part of what we discussed. With you taking the job that you did, and full disclosure, you made it clear to me what your goals were, and I was supportive of that and happy with that, and am happy that you're in the spot that you're in. We knew that this podcast couldn't stay in the same form that it had been for the time that we had done it. Around the same time that you took that job, I actually switched jobs as well. And the time that I had that allowed me the flexibility to do the podcast and for us to pretty much meet up with guests whenever they were around and all those things was impacted too. So the timing of it for both of us was one where it just made sense to discontinue. But both of us talked about how we still wanted to get together and do at least one final episode to talk to the audience a little bit about what the plans were and what had happened and how much we had enjoyed doing the podcast when we were able to do it.
Yeah, absolutely. And full disclosure, the reason why feet were dragged on getting this final episode out to everybody was 100% my fault. The only way I can describe beginning to work as a community manager for Wargaming, or not for Wargaming necessarily, I should say World of Warships, that's more specific. It's sort of like drinking from a fire hose. That's what I was warned by current employees, by former employees. That phrase seemed to be a pattern, as in there's so much information thrown at you so quickly it's just information that's going out constantly. And it takes a moment for the new employee to figure out what is appropriate to ignore. And then it becomes easier to see, this is the stuff that's relevant to me. This is the stuff that's critical for me. And these are the things that I can ignore. Which meant that I could not wrap my head around the idea of sort of sitting and, spitballing on warships for a little while. And trying to do in the context of trying to do a final episode. So it is my fault that it took so long. And I apologize. A lot of you reached out and asked, what happened to the podcast? Are you going to do any more? Are you going to keep working on it? And I sort of was wishy-washy with you because I just didn't know. But here we are, and if you're here, that means you cared enough to come back, and we thank you very much for it. So I think it'd be interesting to talk for a moment. Synpax, when we did sort of your, maybe not farewell episode, but you stepped away from the game for a while, and then you agreed to actually come and be interviewed by me, which was a delight. We did talk a little bit about what the podcast was conceived as and why you wanted to do it. So, I mean, do you mind just kind of giving us an idea of what the genesis of it was for you, and then maybe take us on a little walk about what it became for you, and
Sure. Well,
yeah.
it was two things. First, it was a way to expand and grow the influence and recruitment ability of TNG. Second, though, have you ever walked around the parking lot of a third-rate strip mall and looked at all of the little shops? All of the little shops, and you figure they've got to just barely be making it, probably maybe behind on rent. They're not. You just know they're struggling because, well, A, they're at that location. B, it's a little bit run down, and you see that they've got these big bright signs in front of each of them, and that they had an opening day at some point, and it was so full of promise and hope, and that even to you it looks like a rundown Chinese restaurant, a rundown like dollar store imitation, some other like a furniture repair shop, or all these other little crummy independent shops. That is somebody's dream, an individual that exists because somebody conceived of the idea of, hey, I can start my own business. I'm going to open up this shop and I'm going to put my heart into it. And you kind of get curious about, well, how does that shop operate? What do the books look like? How do they make payroll? How much money do they actually make? And all the, when you're just the guy wandering out into the parking lot, you walk in one of these shops and try to ask these questions. You're going to get the cold shoulder and get tossed out. Maybe they call, the rent-a-cop guy on you and have you thrown off the property.
The rent-a-cop guy, the ubiquitous rent-a-cop guy. Yeah.
Yeah. Right. So, we have thousands of clans, and I was always very curious about, from an anthropological standpoint, the culture of each of these and how they operated. And this is always, you may recall that I was never too keen on like interviewing the top clans, the competitive clans.
Sure.
And to sort of borrow from Leo Tolstoy, all competitive clans are like. They're all alike. I mean, successfully competitive, not want to be competitive, but truly like the top 10 or whatever. They're all basically alike because they all have to do the same things to be competitive and operate in the same way. All non-competitive clans are non-competitive in different ways. This is just borrowing from the intro to, I think it's the first sentence to Anna Karenina. And that is, to me, that's interesting. So we pick like these really obscure clans and we dig into them and find out, because, hey, we're doing a podcast. It's not like the stranger walking in from, into the strip mall bodega and saying, hey, how the hell does this thing stay afloat? How do you keep the lights on? No, we're doing a podcast. It's the only, I think at the time, World of Warships podcast there was. And people are like, oh yeah, I'll talk to you. And it's like, hey, it's an opportunity for you to get some new recruits. So we really got armpit deep into some of the weird cultures that surrounded some of these little non-competitive, and maybe in their minds they aspired to be competitive or something like that, but they never were going to be. But they were going to continue to exist, continue to recruit, continue to have little internal dramas and conflicts, and being able to study that was my curiosity just got the best of me. And then when you joined the clan, I thought, you have a real voice for radio. And then when I met you in person, I realized you also had a face for radio. And we were very successful. And just the right kind of personality that somebody could do that with. I thought, and also, you get people come in the door of a clan. You're like, okay, how can we maximize this person's potential? Maybe they're a great caller. Maybe they're a great administrator. Maybe they've got, they're always online, so they'd be a moderator on the Discord, whatever, or could do other little, update the top score thing. Right? But you came in, we had certain talents. I thought, look, he's good he'd be a good public figure. He's a good speaker. He could be entertaining. He's got a sort of a Hollywood background that he knows things about how a podcast should sound, how it should operate. It was basically a show, a little roll-timey radio show, and that all kind of came together. And what we got, 47 episodes out together or something like that.
Yeah.
It was a little shy of 50.
Yeah,
I'm glad you walked back the idea of at least some of the clans aren't a pawn shop in a strip mall. I appreciate.
Well, I mean, to the outsider, but you just scroll through all these little clans, and look, some of them are just one or two people. They just, hey, just click the button, create the clan. But some of them, they've got like 30 people. They're all active. They have a Discord. They have a community. They have a history, and it's just what's this? They say about New York City, the city of 8 million stories. Well, World of Warships, each clan, thousands of stories, and it was just fascinating because they're all so different, and they're all kind of, like I said, the competitive clans, they're all pretty much the same, and fairly, no offense, Borla and Boggzy, but fairly boring interviews. But you get one of these clans that's basically struggling to get into Storm. Sometimes they do it, sometimes they don't, and you get some really interesting and unique content out of it.
We certainly did. And I feel like, I don't know about you, maybe this is a good time to start talking about particular episodes and experiences and whatnot. I started to feel maybe in our teens almost, like the number of, I want to say like character clans, maybe that's the best word for it, started to dry up a little bit. And when I was searching for them, I started to find, it's like, well, you only find so many clans that, coalesce themselves around an adult male love of My Little Ponies. Or, this is the French-Canadian clan.
Did we ever get those guys, by the way, My Little Pony?
Yeah, ERN, Equestrian Royal Navy. Hell yeah.
Yeah, but did we did that? Did we do that one?
Oh yeah, it was like number 3 or 4, I think.
The one I remember most, and this is where my jaw hit the floor, is when we did Jedi, and one of the guys said that he liked the new Jedi films. Well, yeah, but and what is also kind of interesting too is that as the podcast kind of evolved, there was also kind of a need for, and it was also kind of fun, I guess, to sort of to LARP as the World of Warships independent journalist, because we did some, putting aside that, we did some really, I think, cool episodes where, remember when Wargaming disbanded that Asian clan for cheating?
Oh, yeah.
And we got them, we interviewed,
Yep.
no, not PWP. We did them too. That was different, but they actually destroyed a clan on the Asian server.
UMRR.
Yeah. And he came back on like 3 episodes or 4 episodes later.
Yeah.
Yep, and he talked to him, and then I remember PWP got called out for or allegedly cheating, and we brought them on, and they defended themselves.
Yep.
And the one where we got like the top clans from all different servers after a season, and got them all to talk about the clan battle season.
Yeah.
That stuff, that was really cool, especially whenever you go international, you pull those, like, they'd never talked to each other before, right?
Yeah.
And just bringing them all into a conversation together, that's some real stuff, right? I thought that was really cool too.
Yeah.
So being able to grow into that was, because we could do, I think I've said at this point, we can do whatever the hell we want.
Yeah.
We can do anything we want.
I record. You would say sometimes when we'd sort of hit like a mental roadblock, or yeah, should we do that? I love it when you just pull out the F it card. Basically, you just say, well, who cares? It's our podcast. We can do whatever the hell we want. And I thought, oh, okay, good. But once we started to, I don't want to say drift away, but once we started to rope in and include more concepts and more themes for episodes, things that included like you said, hey, we got the leaders of XYZ clan. I always looked forward to the like post clan battle roundtable podcasts. I thought those were just so great because you could really, and everyone listening is going to just throw up a little bit in their mouths, but like the CV mains, hearing the specific experiences of some of the servers, or even the Asian server, some of their best CV players come on and talk about what their experience is, really explain to you the difference of, well, here's what using this carrier does and what this carrier does. And if you're not a carrier player yourself, you understand one of the most difficult to counter and difficult. Like it's a dynamic thing. The carrier, it changes the way the entire clan battle season has to be played if a carrier is involved. So hearing the carriers describe how their experience is and what the strengths and weaknesses of each individual ship is from their perspective, it was extremely educational to me in terms of trying to figure out, okay, well, what are we able to get away with if this carrier is in the game? What are we able to get away with if this carrier is in the game?
Yep. And the thing is, there was no substitute for what we were doing. There was no alternative to get that. You could not get
Right.
what we were doing anywhere else.
Yeah, and that's something. I mean, Borla, you notoriously collect CV mains, which is always very funny.
That's how we won COTS.
By all the CV mains.
Yeah, no, I mean we have a lot of CV players. I don't know where it all started. Probably when Cable Guy came over and he had Firja with him, and together the two of them became pretty meaningful when CVs got into clan battles. It didn't start out as a purposeful thing, and then as it became a very polarized subject, there were more people who were like, hey, I'm accepted over there, and came around. And then also some of the guys who were there trained up people so that they could get better, help them perfect their CV play and things like that. I think most of our group are not fans of what CVs do in the game. But as I've said on here many times, the reality is they're going to be around in clan battles and they're going to be around in randoms. So we deal with the reality, not what we wish things were. So that's kind of how we ended up with quite a few of those guys. And I also think something, and you guys, when you guys did the podcast before I was a part of it, you started this, but something that Boggzy and I continued was getting people in the community, individuals that brought some credibility to what we were talking about. You guys, famously had Sub Octavian on at different times. Boggzy and I had Flambass and Chrysantos and Mr. Conway and other people. And I think that really brought something to the story of the game too, and helped personalize some of those people to the audience.
Yeah, I mean, especially I won't forget when you and I had Flambass on, because I watched his. I hope he doesn't get upset about hearing this, but I watched his personality change the longer we talked to him, because to be a streamer and to be like a figure where your personality is your brand. Sure, you have content that you create, whether it's a live stream, whether it's YouTube videos, whether it's a podcast, but especially if it's centered around you are the brand. Your personality is the brand. So you have to somewhat be a performer. Flambass is very entertaining to watch. He's very knowledgeable, but to talk with him for, God, what was it, an hour and a half, I think?
And he stayed after we finished the episode. He stayed in Discord, and him and I hung out for another 45 minutes or an hour, and he was extremely personable, nice guy. Yeah. It was enjoyable. We just had an enjoyable conversation, probably 60% about the game and 40% about other things.
And that was the really interesting thing, was because I feel like as a personality that sells something, which is your brand, it's like, hey, I'm selling you a good experience when you come watch my stream or you check my YouTube videos or what have you. There needs to be a certain, certain something. I think in the entertainment industry we just call it that they just got it, which I would just call charisma. I would just say charisma, and I would define charisma as tempered ego, personally, where it's like you have an ego, but your ego knows its boundaries. So you are that person who pushes the boundaries of what's acceptable, but you don't trod over and disrespect the boundary. You sort of just carefully push it. And people applaud the fact that you're able to perceive where that boundary is. I think it's what comedians do. It's sometimes what actors do. But, any type of performative personality, really, that's sort of what they're doing. They're safely pushing the boundaries, I would say. And it was interesting to talk to him because he's kind of in your face a little bit at first. And then as you talk to him, you sort of realize, okay, well, who's this person underneath the character? And, he was very reasonable by the end of it. He's very reasonable. He had, he was more willing to answer questions like, well, how would you do it if you were in charge? Or how would you do this thing? And I don't know, that was fascinating to me, to be able to hold people's feet to the fire. I wish, maybe this is something, maybe we could transition and talk now to things that we sort of wish we could have done, but we never really got around to. I wish that we could have brought Flamu on. At a certain point, I gave up, but I still wish that we could have got him, because I kind of wanted to, as a community contributor, I kind of wanted to challenge him a little bit, on his personality and on his presentation and whatnot. Not in like a I'm gonna get you or something like that, but just try to create a reasonable conversation and try to maybe create some knowledge or create some path forward, or I don't know, something like that. Was there anything that you guys, maybe Synpax, maybe you could start with this question. Was there anything you wanted to do that you never really got around to?
Well, there were individual. We had quite a list of potential shows on the drawing board, and eventually some would come to pass, some would not. But there were individual shows that I thought would have been really good if we could make them happen. Honestly, I was not terribly enthusiastic to get Flamu on, because it just seemed like it would be to me a very boring podcast, but we would do it because it would be good for the podcast. Because
good for numbers.
Good for numbers, because if we got him on, he might mention our podcast on his stream or something, and then we have a new audience, grow it, etc. But honestly, I could not get excited about it. And it's not, look, I learned a lot from the guy. I think he's, whatever. But I just didn't think it was going to be interesting. The one, and funny, because if you think about, I'm going to tell you the podcast I missed getting the most, and you contrast it to my complete lack of interest in talking to Flamu, is I wanted Lieutenant JFK. I really wanted him so bad. No, and we were not going to. It was not to beat him up or anything. It's just like, he is a well-known character on the North American server. I believe he has the most games played of anybody. And
yes.
And I'm not speaking out of school to say that he is well-known in ranked, because as well as other things, as being just somebody that I don't want to. He's not here to defend himself, but it is a fact that is somebody that you would cause indigestion if he ended up on your team. And also a very vocal person, and had been in several of the more, I'd say, controversial clans and kicked out of them. So he was just a personality that, like, I wanted to find out who the real person was behind it. That's a million times more interesting to me as a podcast than,
sure,
at some streamer, because whatever.
I heard that I've heard a couple of people say they actually met him at Anchors Away tours back before.
There's somebody in my clan, GM Schwartz, I believe.
They said he's actually really a nice person, and he's very enthusiastic. He just got.
I feel like in some ways that if you do one of these podcasts, like, in some ways it was really an opportunity for people who had maybe a problem reputation to rehabilitate themselves. I felt that was the case with 90th, which is our first podcast. I felt that was the case with Sub Octavian. I mean, you could not listen to that podcast and come away with as negative opinion as you had before it.
I wouldn't think so. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think it was a real, but again, I wanted to meet him. There are some other podcast ideas we had, which were on the drawing boards, which were more or less just humors, like good humor. I think the concept was we were going to do a interview with the Boys Out to Sea clan.
Boys Out to Sea clan? What is that?
Yeah. Well, think about it a moment. And the voice was going to sound a lot like who's that famous astrophysicist who was a quadriplegic and couldn't talk?
Boys Out to Sea bots. You were thinking, I know exactly.
Yeah, we were going to interview, we were going to start interviewing clans that weren't real. They were just
Stephen Hawking.
Stephen Hawking is what you're thinking.
Yeah, so we'd have a Stephen Hawking voice, and he'd be very emphatic about the fact, yeah, we're just a couple of humans here all hanging out playing World of Warships. And just some of these crazy concepts of think about it, it just becomes a stage play. If you can invent a clan, which would just be a fun thing to,
right,
and just all the peculiarities, and maybe you start off because you're interviewing them, you're completely serious about it, and the audience kind of starts to figure out, wait a minute, something's not right here. And you bring them along for the ride, and it just becomes a sketch comedy, I guess.
Yeah, and there's something really fun in the creativity of that. It's like literally, because I'd say there's probably, as soon as you introduce the bot character, then there's 40 seconds to 60 seconds where the audience member listening goes, wait, what the hell am I listening to? Is this real? Like they try. I always get excited thinking about the wheels turning in a person's head while they try to figure out, am I being played here or am I missing something? You know.
Well, that's called trolling, Boggzy. And
No, it's not.
I am, if nothing else, a huge troll. The whole TNG, the whole thing, it was just one big troll.
Is that
troll.
so?
That is so. And trolling is an art. What can I say?
I had no idea. Borla, was there an episode or an idea that you were really excited to get to that we didn't actually get to?
I also would have liked to have had Flamu on if he would have been on and kind of been himself the way Flambass was.
Mm-hmm.
I do think that could have been a good episode because you and I had some thoughts about how he presents things and what part of it's real and what part of it's a character. And if we could have got into something like that, I think it would have been entertaining. In general, most of the episodes that I wanted to do, fortunately, we were able to at least play around with and get done. We did a non-warships episode, which I thought was fun.
Yeah.
You know, if you and I had different schedules and things, I think we could have some fun episodes not involving warships. But it just the entire time it was kind of a perfect storm of when Synpax stepped away, it opened up some opportunity, and then you and I had gotten along and become friends. And with my job situation with COVID, I was working from home 100% of the time, had a flexible schedule. You had an open schedule during the day, so
Mm-hmm.
it was just a fun last year doing these, I thought. So I kind of am finishing it off, thinking things in a very positive light. I was happy with how everything went. We had some pretty good numbers by the end.
We really did.
I think many episodes had over 1,000 listens between all the different platforms.
Yep.
And I lots of times got recognized in games, people giving nice comments, looking forward to the next episodes. I always wish it would have been fun to have a little more interaction with our audience to see who really was listening the most and who were the people who were catching every episode and who learned things that they benefited from and who actually laughed at our corny jokes.
You know what we really didn't do enough of, though, Boggzy?
What's that?
Because we did name, what was it, Sink a Ship, etc.
Yep.
The one thing that never really took off that I feel like we should have been had more commitment to was name that horn.
I love that.
The best concept.
See, it's so strange to hear you laugh. You don't laugh very much, and I love that the horn idea is what gets you every single time. It's just
such a great, name that. You do the horn, the pop. Because it's an audio medium. What better way to get audience interaction? Okay, everybody name the horn. The first one to name it correctly.
Now that there's over 500 chips.
Yeah, but there's 4 horns. There's 4 horns and 500 ships. It's it could be absolutely anything. There's only one. I think there's only one ship in the game with a unique horn, as far as I know, and it's the Almirante Abreu, the ship that was created specifically for the Brazilian community manager Maridraco, so that he could have something to give out to streamers and whatnot to sort of make more dynamic interaction with his Brazilian community, which honestly, as a streamer, as who got to give that out, it's a super fun little thing because people like to collect chips, and even though it's a tier 2, they like
I
to
was
collect.
really excited when I got one of those from you. That made my week, and then I played it a bunch to get to number 1 on the boards for that ship, and then I haven't looked in months, but somebody finally passed me, and I was number 2 last time I looked. Yeah,
but that actually has a unique horn. It has the Brazilian national anthem as the horn, and it's or something like that, which is just delightful.
You guys, there was one that we had on the board that I was looking through the episodes just ahead of this podcast we're doing now, and there's one in there that you got to that was on the board that I really also wanted to do, and that was General Dort with the rank out around the world.
Oh yeah, that son of a bitch! He live streamed the podcast on his Twitch channel while we were doing it and didn't tell me.
Sounds like
I don't think I ever knew that.
Oh yeah, that
would have been fun to hang out and watch.
It would have been, but at the same time, there's a certain. We never really censored ourselves too much on this podcast. We asked people not to use, the F word. We asked them to keep swearing to a limit. But we specifically asked, hey, don't call out anyone negatively by name. Not any clans, not any people, because we're not here to be salacious. That's just not what we're here for. But sometimes we'll have conversations where we might make an example of this would be salacious. Don't call X person Y thing. And we would usually talk about that beforehand, before we go live. And he started recording it right when we started talking, not even when the podcast started. And I was like, I could have said something that I wouldn't really want broadcast as part of this brand, beforehand.
It's interesting to me is that podcast came out of having read his post on the forum about it. And it's written in such this even tone, seems like just a really nice, charitable, kind gentleman, and his persona, at least, as a Twitch streamer, is somewhat dissonant.
He's
with
a gorilla
the tone of who wrote it. So anyway, but I'm glad you got that one done. I hope you got some good insights out of that, because that's again part of the anthropological aspect of the podcast.
Ultimately, it ended up being one of the better episodes, definitely top 15%, because he has for those of you listening who don't recall, you can always go look it up and listen to it, but General Dort is a member of 07, or I think he may be with SKD now, it's hard to tell, but he specifically on his Twitch stream would do things where he would go and he would rank out in all 4 servers. So in the Russian server, in the European, the Asian, and the American server. And then he even has played on the Chinese server. There's some of you may not remember this. There was actually a Chinese server. There's a 5th server that is, I think it's I don't remember exactly, but it always was behind in its updates. I think it might be caught up now.
Originally, for a very long time, it never went to the CV update, correct?
Right. Yep. For a long time, it still had RTS
0.800 or something like that.
Yeah.
And all the exploit. I actually played on it. I have an account there.
No kidding?
Yeah, I did. I was just curious about it. And actually, we have a Chinese member in our clan. I go ahead and name check him, Serious Ed, and he helped me because I can't, believe it or not, gentlemen, I don't read Chinese. He helped me get through some of the registration screens, and I played on it, and I got to play against the old-fashioned CVs. And
no kidding.
Honestly, that's a podcast episode there, is to talk to one of the top clans, and it operates completely differently in terms of the store, shop, and it's Wargaming does not control it. It's sort of basically to do business in China, you kind of got to be a Chinese company, so they partnered with a Chinese company. They have a lot of I suspect they have a lot of authority over how things are done. So ships that are not for sale on the other servers are there. I think almost every ship is always for sale because it's money. But it is they're good players over there. And for a long time, you could watch the Asian clan that we interviewed, UMR or whatever. They would play on both the Chinese server and the Asian server. So if you watch their streams, you'd see them jump back and forth, and suddenly you'd see RTS CV play, and they're on the Chinese server.
As just speaking as Wargaming, I can neither confirm nor deny that the Chinese server is, that it's a separate company. I honestly don't know. I haven't bothered to look into it because it wasn't relevant to me. But that is interesting.
You're curious now, aren't you?
I'm kind of curious. Yeah, I confess. That would be really interesting, though, to speak to hey, someone who plays on that Chinese server, just say, hey, what's the difference? Dort, for example, we got to talking about this because of Dort ranking out in all the servers. He just started to describe it as a completely different experience. And just hearing his attitudes on how ranked in each server and each region goes, it was very interesting. He said that there really were distinct kind of metas and distinct ways of playing. It's how do you know that otherwise without just grabbing someone and saying, tell me everything. You just shake them and you say, tell me.
Isn't that cool though? And we also saw a little bit of that when we got the server champs all together. And
yes,
you'd think they all would have optimized among the same meta, and no, they were radically different strategies that won the server.
Yeah, And if you sort of watched if you watch King of the Sea internationals, and I'm going to make a shameless plug for it because I had the good fortune of hosting King of the Sea internationals from Prague, Czechoslovakia. Wait, did I say Czechoslovakia? Czech Republic.
It's not-
Womp womp. I'm gonna get some emails tomorrow. That's for sure. Boggzy, please, Czech Republic. Watching them come together and play against each other is just absolutely fascinating. And we actually have Borla from Clan KSC, who himself. I completely forgot. Forgive me to extend a hearty congratulations to you publicly on congratulations Borla and Clan KSC on winning COTS 13 North America region.
Yeah, congratulations.
I appreciate that, guys. It was not a whole lot to do with me other than setting up the organization for it. I was technically on the roster, but I was out of the country for the first part. So by the time I got back and we were talking about who was going to play, I kind of opted out to let the guys who had already been playing play. And Danny and some of the other guys, they did a really nice job. And I think, Boggzy, you had Danny and Aussie Zeus on, or no, you had Coop and Aussie Zeus on your stream.
It's co-op
Danny's
now.
afraid. Yeah, Danny's afraid to show his face to anybody. He's got a thing about that. We all assume he's hideously ugly. But, Coop's the Boggzy Jr. of the KSC group. So.
I swear to God, he looks like we could be at the very least cousins.
Yeah.
I had never seen him before, and so like literally, I'm live in front of 10,000 people when he pops up on screen, and I went, "Holy shit!" Like,
that's my kid brother.
that's my brother. It was so strange.
Yeah. So yeah, it was a nice thing. But to your point, the metas are very different, and I think some of it has to do with the random battles people are used to playing, and then the clan battles, adopt metas off of that. And when you're trying to deal with the meta on your server, you're building teams that are optimized to face that and counter that or take advantage of things. And it's just different cultures of the way the game is played. The same way different cultures or different areas, food's different, music's different, whatever the style of the play. And I think some of it has to do with, in certain areas it's more patience, in other areas it's more aggressive, and some of them are more dynamic in how they do things, and you can really, really see the differences play out in COTS. And I think if you had COTS once a month, those metas would begin to meld, and kind of like Synpax says, people would optimize things together. But because it's only every 6 months, and there's really not much interaction between the servers other than COTS, you get that really dynamic and differing styles of play, and it makes for a good time. And my guys were kind enough that there was enough space on the roster that they left me, so I still get that nice NA COTS emblem that shows up in
So you finally
game.
got it then.
Yeah, we got it the other day. So our guys, I apologize for some of our guys probably sending you DMs and forum messages and probably peeking in your window at home, trying to figure out when that was going to be, holding you personally responsible for the rewards.
I was personally responsible for distributing the flags and the emblems. The flags were easy to distribute, but the emblems, it's much more complicated. I want to just say this right now to everybody for COTS 14. You have to put the people on your team into the roster, because that's how we track their ID numbers. Because I cannot tell you how many people, probably 20 to 30 people, have individually messaged King of the Sea NA, and it therefore makes its way to me, saying, I didn't get my rewards. And then so I look up their name, I look up their ID, I then look through my spreadsheet, which it was a spreadsheet made by Frice from 07. It's a glorious spreadsheet. He did an incredible job of organizing it so that it tracks rewards, like, even individually. It's really, really an extraordinary piece that he put together. And I'll check that. And then I'll go back through the variety of invoices that I sent out to actually distribute the rewards. It's like every time I check something, it's like a 5-step process to check to see if somebody got something. And then I find out, no, they didn't, because they weren't signed up. So their name and their ID never got cataloged anywhere, and I have no way of verifying whether they were actually there or whether they're just trying to get some free steel. So, put your name on the sign-up sheet. And team captains, if you have somebody enter your team or leave your team, so then you don't want them getting the rewards. You don't want to share the rewards with them. You have to let the COTS organizers know so they can update the sheet with the ID number. It's that simple. Anyway, I'm glad you got your emblem.
The next thing they're going to complain about is the T-shirt. I don't know who sends out the T-shirts.
I'm not sure either, because I really only dealt with COTS NA. That's international, which would be some of the EU guys. But I know that things are still happening. It just takes time to actually send out physical items. So, but anyway, blatant, shameless plug for COTS. Guys, I wanted to say, if I may, that I've had, I would say, extremely good fortune in 2021 so far. In 2020, besides the pandemic and all that, I had the good fortune of becoming a community contributor for World of Warships. I was tasked with taking over leadership of one of North America's stronger clans, along with two other gentlemen, Late Light and Antonius Jones. That was an extremely useful learning experience in terms of becoming more competitive, but also learning what it takes to actually keep people wanting to play for you. And then, I had the further good fortune of being able to actually translate this work that I had been doing into a new career path, which was great for me because I was tired of being a bartender. And I really, none of this would have happened if Synpax hadn't asked me to do a podcast with him. And I think I say that a lot, but the two of you specifically, it also would not have happened if Borla, you had not been a consistent, helpful hand in, talking me through things when things were difficult, and Synpax, you as well. I mean, I owe the two of you an enormous amount of gratitude and thanks for helping me get onto what I would call a stable path during a time when, lots of people obviously are going through instability and difficulty trying to reckon with the sort of changes that happen in life due to the pandemic and whatnot. So thank you to both of you. I really, really appreciate everything you guys have done.
Well, I can't speak for Borla, but speaking for myself, you're welcome. And also, it was really just a matter, I think, of finding maybe just helping you recognize the path that you were supposed to be on. Not supposed to be sounds kind of fatalistic, but the path that was the natural progression for where your talents and skills and all that you can bring to the table needs to develop and where it needed to go. I don't want to get you in trouble by saying this, but I told you a very long time ago that the path forward for you was working for Wargaming. And I'm not going to mention, a long time ago. This is like when you first started streaming. It's like, okay, where's this going to go? And I'm not going to mention on the podcast how resistant you were to the idea at first, but I do remember, and I was like, no, you're that's for you. You got to get a job at Wargaming. It's where you belong. And anyway, I am glad that I cannot tell you because it didn't happen right away, and there were, I don't know how public it is, but there's a moment, what you went through to get it, and there was it appeared like it was going to go can we just say on the podcast that the first job that you looked at for Wargaming isn't the job you took?
Yes.
Yes.
I don't think there's anything wrong with mentioning that. Synpax was correct, and that the whole point that came up was that when I started streaming, I remember you saying, "Well, so where do you want to go with this?" And I said, "Well, it's just for fun, and it brings attention to the podcast." And then you said, "Right, but like best case scenario, what do you see happening from this?" And I said, "Well, I could become a." I said, I think it's really, really difficult for someone streaming World of Warships to make a living. I think you have to be one of a very, very few privileged elite, and that's what I'm going to call them, is privileged elite, who have secured an audience. And I think that a big part of securing that audience comes from being there at the right time, which was relatively early. The Flamus, the Flambasses, the Eye Chases, the Gibbons, the guys who really did rack up high numbers in terms of, views on their YouTube or their Twitch or what have you. Those people were around at a time when the streaming market, let's say, had not really been saturated yet. So there was more of an open opportunity to sort of make your mark and collect followers. But I came in too late, and I think you were correct in assuming that, there's really not a path forward in terms of making a living as a streamer. But it didn't hurt to continue doing it, certainly, because that that actually got community contributor status for essentially the podcast. I guess it was me, but essentially it was the podcast, and that led to me being invited to do things like be part of the King of the Sea tournaments, the Verizon Warrior Series tournament, and that eventually, I think I did. I was approached. Somebody sent me the link. Hey, there's a job opening at Wargaming, and I did think back to what Synpax had said, which was, yeah, that's all well and good to be a streamer, but that's sort of like trying to make a living as an actor or a comedian. You're a performer, and that's really, really hard. But like, to go work for the company is just another place to explore how your talents, can help something grow. So the first thing I applied for was actually in Europe. It was in the EU Prague office. And I went through a number of interviews with them, just really nice people, really delightful people. And, it came down to whether or not I would be willing to relocate. And I really wasn't sure. But then I had to talk with, my partner, Brianna, and we had to talk about whether that was something we could do. And we just decided it probably was not the right thing for us as a couple. And so I ended up saying no, which I was disappointed by, and they were disappointed by, I think. But then I said I would really like to work for the company because I enjoy the game and I like making content out of it. And I said I'll wait for something to open up in North America. And something did open up in North America, and that led here. And fortunately, my girlfriend Brianna was willing to move with me to Texas for that. Otherwise, I wouldn't have done it. So I should mention, too, that she was extraordinarily supportive of me throughout all of this. She loved that I made the podcast with you. She loved that I streamed, and she was also good about reminding me, hey, it doesn't have to be bearing fruit right now, as long as you're making something and you see where it can go. So,
It's very kind, by the way, that a woman who will tell you that's a keeper.
Yes. A partner who will encourage you, but not, I don't know, maybe what's the term, blow smoke up your ass? Like,
well, no, it's more like, no, but have the patience to say, okay, you're not making any money. Why are you wasting time with this?
Sure.
She bought in early, basically.
I guess so.
And I've made it clear to you that you have my personal support for this. We talked long ago about what you wanted to do with your streaming, long term, what you wanted to do career wise. I definitely think the type of role that you're in right now is a good fit for you because you can grasp the player side, but you also do good with presenting it to people. Your training that you've had, your education that you had with acting and performing, and through practice on Twitch and the podcast, like that's helped set you up for success. And you had people cheering you on, but you also did the work and put in the time, and had like Bree supporting you through months and months. Looking back in the future, it probably won't seem like as long as it was, but I'm sure in the moment, that's a lot of time and investment to put into streaming several days a week during the same hours, trying to build up an audience.
Yeah.
I can remember logging on, and you and I talked about, I would log on to your stream, and it was often at the time of day I was getting off the computer, but I would leave it on, walk by and post something or do something, stay active on it. But as your numbers went from 20 or 30 people to all of a sudden 70 or 80 to consistently over 100, and oftentimes really high numbers, and then being used by Wargaming for some of those other things, I couldn't be happier for you. And I think you're a good fit for the job, and I was glad to be able to watch it happen along the way.
Well, that's very nice of you. And specifically to you, Borla, I could also not be more grateful that, when Synpax decided to step away from the game and therefore the podcast, that was, I mean, a little part of me was sort of devastated because, Synpax had sort of held my hand and taken a risk on including me in something that he was doing. And anybody in the entertainment industry, I think, understands when somebody else takes a risk by including you in something that they're doing, it's a huge thing because it's an opportunity to learn, it's an opportunity to work, and it's an opportunity to create something that you can point to later and say, hey, see that thing? I did that thing. And that's it. Like, that's all that there is in some ways. Of, you could say, I'm a trained actor or whatever, I'm a trained journalist or whatever. Great. So what have you done? What do you mean, what have I done? Well, you haven't done anything. Well, I don't need to. I have all this training. Right, but I need to see what you've done with that to know whether you can do it for me. Like, it's such a simple concept that I really think a lot of college students don't get anymore, which is like, it's not about what someone's taught you, it's about what you've been able to synthesize on your own,
Okay, boomer.
Okay, boomer.
Well, and I'm, yeah. and
that may have been a little preachy. I apologize.
Yeah, no, I'm grateful that when Synpax stepped away, you both know that I was a fan of the podcast from the beginning, from the very first episode. Made comments to both you and Boggzy. You and I had a lot of conversations about it, and I enjoyed what you were doing in the community side and the anthropological stuff, where Synpax is coming from. Like, all of that was interesting to me. And I've been, for most of the last 15 years, I've had a job where I spent a ton of time in the car. So I enjoyed listening to podcasts. I listened to mostly sports radio and stuff, but more thinking, not like the hot take type stuff. And I always thought in the back of my mind that seemed enjoyable, and that I thought I could do something like that. Not necessarily on some, huge level like that, but just, I could carry a conversation with somebody and do those sorts of things if it was a subject that I enjoyed, and, people might find it entertaining. So to be able to put that into practice, even in a relatively modest audience, but we had consistent numbers, and we had people who were giving us feedback and listening every week, and people asking us if we went more than a few days, without a new podcast, what's the next one going to be on? That was a regular thing in game. I used to always send you snapshots of people saying things.
Yeah.
So I knew that with your career path and changes that were going to be taking place for me, is that eventually there was a clock on it, right? Like, this wasn't going to be a forever thing, but I really, really had a good time. And so I appreciate the hard work that you and Synpax put into establishing the podcast. And I really appreciate you being gracious enough to include me along the way, and had a really good time doing those episodes.
Yeah, it was good to see that Boggzy was able to find a good partner, because it is a little challenging to do it solo, and that's why I grabbed Boggzy. So I'm glad he was able to find you, Borla, and somebody to balance it out. And what you brought something unique. I think a kind of a unique, put it this way, thoughtfulness, I think, which I think helped the podcast change and grow and expand. So I'm grateful that Boggzy was able to find you and you were available for it. But you did hit on something there. It's like you're sort of talking about your experience with listening to sports radio and what you were looking for when you listened. Is that I can't remember I don't remember who it was, but you may remember this, Boggzy, but somebody sent us an email sort of meant to be sort of a complaining about the thing, saying, yeah, it's not that great of a podcast. Okay. It's basically just something for me to listen to while I'm mowing the lawn. And to me,
we got him, guys. We got him.
That's exactly what we were aiming for.
Yeah.
That's exactly it. Yeah. Something you can listen to while you're mowing the lawn. It's not political. It's not controversial. I mean, how controversial can Warships be? It's just kind of like a sort of a fun, jokey, humorous podcast about basically a casino game where there's some community, there's some interesting things going on, but it's just like a podcast that will not under any circumstances stress you out, and just be sort of a fun, dumb thing that is interesting enough to hold. David Spade, his book came out. I don't remember exactly, but it had a brilliant title. It's Almost Interesting. It was his autobiography.
Yeah.
And that's sort of what we were aiming for. It's interesting to almost interesting. Well, and I think we landed it.
And I'll tell you, one of the best compliments, and I do appreciate your comments about me, one of the best compliments that I got along the way, one of the guys, Warships has a lot of an older crowd, an older demographic than most video games, I would say. And so one of the guys in KSE, Foster's NC, was on a road trip with his son, and his son was a teenager, big video game player, listened to podcasts on Call of Duty and other, first person shooter games. And so they were in his truck on like a 5 or 6 hour drive, and he caught up on our podcast while he was in the truck with his son. And he told me, like, his son, after listening to an episode or two, was like, that's really good. Like, that's really well done. Like, I listened to video game podcasts, and that might be one of the better ones I've ever heard.
Huh.
So that was somebody who was not a Warships fan, a younger kid listening to it, and it was the production quality and the conversation and the chemistry.
Are you
and
sure this
everything
guy
else.
listens to a lot of podcasts? Maybe they were tuning into something. Are you sure we're listening to this one?
It was probably to get in good with the boss.
Maybe a little gilding of the lily, but just to be able to listen to it on a long drive. I mean, but isn't that exactly what you want a podcast to be? Just,
I mean, I listen
it's not must see TV, right? But
this is so weird. I'll listen to Joe Rogan's podcast sometimes if I feel like his guest is someone, if the guest is someone tied to a subject that I find interesting. I'll listen to 2-3 hours of a Joe Rogan's podcast on a long trip, but I tend to listen to like university lectures. That there's a lot of university professors that'll actually put their stuff out on YouTube. And Synpax, you and I have traded a few that we enjoy a couple times, but I tend to listen to that. But I've even lately just found myself like I'll just watch through some YouTubers' content about World of Warships, like I still get the test boats and stuff like that, but every once in a while I'll pull up Sea Raptor's YouTube channel because he'll do first looks where he just takes a look at the ship while it's in testing, and he'll do what he's allowed to do, which is just sort of discuss the stats and discuss what it could be potentially. But it's just fun to hear him talk about it and hear another human being sort of verbalize what I might be thinking about it based on what I see on the dev blog or what have you. So I'll even just I could look all that information up for myself, but sometimes it's just fun to hear somebody else's perspective on it. So I want to point out that I think it's one of the cool things that we did, because Synpax, you mentioned specifically that you appreciated Borla's, what was the word you used to describe that he had a perspective on things that was like measured. Thoughtfulness, yeah, not measured, thoughtfulness. I specifically took a lot of pride in, both when it was me and Borla and also when it was myself and Synpax, that we didn't take a side, really. And I feel like we always said, we're not journalists. That's not what we're doing. We're not trying to get the cold, hard facts. We're trying to illuminate the culture is more what we're trying to do. Whenever there was something that came up, I always liked that we tried really hard to get to the underlying reality of what was going on without staying hard fast to those rules, which meant that, like, if someone came on and just wanted to complain about wargaming, we'd sort of go, well, okay, sure, fair enough, but, like, what do you want to do differently? Well, I want to do this. Okay, right, but to do that, you've got to do this. Why do I have to do that? Well, because this is how this works. This is how this structure works. And it's not, you move one thing and other things change, and you have to be cognizant of that if you're going to run a video game, which is a business. And then, there would be things that wargaming would do that we would go, okay, we need to have a talk about this because this is a terrible mistake. I felt like sometimes we got labeled as apologists or shills or what have you, simply because we were not anti-Ouija, because we weren't anti-Ouija.
You also have to care about labels for that to matter at all. And if you don't, then
it's true. You do have to care about labels.
I try to approach most things in life from a pragmatic standpoint. There's some things that you can't control, and you need to be able to adapt or deal with them. And sometimes the goals of an organization or a group are different than you would have their goals be, or you wish their goals would be, but you don't have the power or ability to change them in reality. So wargaming's goal is to make money, right? That's the primary goal, is to be a successful business, to have Warships be a successful business. And a secondary goal to that is to have the game enjoyable and the quality of life be good. But the first goal is for it to be a profitable business. And I kind of tried to always recognize that along the way as changes happened. Some of the things are a trade-off for the different goals. And, you're not going to like all of them, but it's where is the value for you? And I think probably Boggzy, for you and I, having stuck around the game, and maybe Synpax, this is part of where you stepped away when you start looking at the costs. I don't think for any of us it was specifically money costs that were our biggest weight. It was what's the time and mental and emotional energy into our communities and everything else that we're doing. And for the people who are enjoying the game, they have to figure out, is this a net positive or a net negative at the end of the day?
Yeah.
You know, the money, the time, everything else. Am I benefiting from this or not? And what changes would I have to make for it to be a benefit? And the change could be, hey, I'm going to spend less money, or hey, I'm going to spend more money so I don't have to grind stuff, or hey, I'm going to spend less time, I'm going to step away from the game, or more time, or I'm going to focus. You know, for me, a lot of my focus went more into my community and putting time into trying to run and organize that and have it set up to succeed in a time where I'm not going to be sitting at the computer all day, every day, like I was for much of COVID. So those types of things, if you have that perspective, then it upsets you less, the little details that don't align with what you personally want.
How have you found that? I mean, now that we've got 3 guys here in this room who have all been in charge of clans that generally consistently make purple tags. So, I mean, Borla, what's changed for you now that now that the game has evolved a little bit more, now that you're back to work and you don't have the same amount of time? How has that affected your ability to run the clan?
Well, during COVID, I was working and employed, but my job had me being home all the time, and it wasn't taking up as much time as it had before. I made a change in jobs this summer that was a huge, an overwhelming positive for me overall, both in, I love my new job. I love my company. I make more money. I'm just really excited about it. You and I have had some conversations about that.
Yeah.
But it takes up more of my time during the day. I'm busy. So I don't have as much time to get into the details as I did before. So I have to delegate more. I have to trust people. Fortunately, there's been very little turnover in the leadership of my group. So we've kind of grown together, and we've put a lot more things in place, even in the last couple of months, to have structure around the things that used to just all be in the bandwidth that I had. And I think, Synpax, you probably had this when you were the key guy running TNG. I had my fingers in everything before, and I had the pulse on every single thing, and I had to step back a little bit and say, I can't keep that bandwidth up for the game and still have the success that I need in more important areas of my life, with some of the changes in career and things like that. I don't have that time. So deciding who the right people are. Synpax made a comment earlier about maximizing the abilities of members, figuring out what people are good at, and then pointing them in those directions. And that's one of the things that I think our group has been pretty successful at, is figuring out what somebody's good at and what they like to do, and then empowering them to do that and having them teach and train other people to do the same thing, so that it's able to be scaled and replicated and keep moving even as individuals have changes in life.
Yeah. I mean, it obviously, things changed for me in that regard quite rapidly, I want to say. A lot of it happened to me in the space of about a year. But being able to identify who can handle certain responsibilities, and then giving them the structure in which to actually partake in that is critical. I mean, between the 3 leaders of TNG, myself, Late Light, Antonius Jones, we sort of realized that, like, I could handle being in front of people, and I could handle recruiting and things like that, because people were generally familiar with who I am in the competitive community because of this podcast and streaming and COTS and whatnot. And because of that, there's a familiarity, and therefore there's an instant trust. If I say, hey, I noticed you're not in a clan right now, if you're looking for a new one, why don't you come talk with us? And that made things immeasurably easier. But I'm not terribly organized as a person. It's something I kind of struggle with. And Antonius Jones is extremely organized. The guy,
He is.
he's
He
very,
is,
very organized.
absolutely.
Absolutely. And then, Late Light was somebody who could act as basically the guy who could do whatever Jones or I couldn't do when necessary, but also he acted as a tiebreaker as well. Like, Late Light was able to sort of be like the dad who just said the final word on things. Like if Jones and I couldn't agree on what to do about something, we just say, "All right, Late, you have to make this decision now." And and then he tended to play more games than either of the two of us. We just had this great kind of triumvirate of sharing responsibility for the clan, and it worked out, I think, exceptionally well. We were
From my point of view, I thought it was pretty. I was really impressed. I was also I thought you did a great job, and you sort of expanded on the role that you did earlier. But I was particularly impressed with Antonius, because I think sometimes people, you don't really know what they're capable of until they're just sort of thrown into it. Because honestly, if I knew that Antonius had that level of interest and I don't even know if I had asked him, I don't think he would have said yes. In fact, no, I did ask him.
You did
and
ask him.
He
He
didn't say
said no.
yes.
He did
said
say
no,
yes.
but then it turns out he had the ability and interest and availability and passion to do everything that I originally asked him to do that he said no to, and now he's doing it, and that pleases me tremendously. So I hope he hears this, and yeah, I definitely owe you a beer, because we actually don't live that far apart. I'd love to sit down at a bar somewhere with him and just say, "Hey, man, how's it going?" But it, you know, it, I'm fairly impressed and pleased, and very glad to see, because it was a rough transition. There are other things going on during the transition or around it, and I was for me, basically this clan became a dumping ground for skills that I did not have a place to. I did not have another place to dump these skills, and then circumstances of life kind of changed, and I was just suddenly everything I was doing at TNG I had the opportunity to do, which I've been working at for a long time, to do in the real world, and that meant time wise I could not continue at the level
Yeah.
that I was at before.
Well, you
So
put a lot of work into the clan. I mean,
I put way more time adminning than I actually did playing the game, which is kind of unfortunate, because I mean it's a really good game. I'm not. I don't know if we can all. I think we can all agree on this. There's nothing else. There's nothing else out there like it. Not remotely like it.
yeah. There's
So
no naval arcade game really. This is the only one.
it's not even the naval aspect. It's sort of the type of. I think there was this guy who used to be in OPG, and I can't remember his name, but he put it perfectly. No, his name was Derek Slide. Does that name mean anything to either of you?
No.
I don't recall.
Anyway, he was one of the more self-confident guys in OPG back in the day, and I remember him saying at one point, "This is a game of patience and strategy," and I don't really find that. I've not found that anywhere else, and because you still have these intense moments of action, and there's still a lot of RNG in the game and all that, but this game of patience and strategy that is still has those intense moments. It just doesn't exist anywhere else. So it is a very good game.
Yeah.
So it was.
I also think the variety that it brings, depending on what you're doing. So right now, the snowflakes that are going on.
Okay, that sucks. That sucks. By the way, Boggzy, as I'm actually right now just autopiloting into the middle of the cap in co-op to get my snowflake so I can get my steel.
So that was kind of my point, is like sometimes I'll wake up in the morning, I'll have coffee, I'll knock 2 or 3 of those off in co-op, and then if I feel like playing some randoms, I can play them solo, I can play them in a div, there's clan battles, there's ranked, there's a variety of things depending on what mood you're in or how you want your interaction to be. There are days where I just want to sit by myself and play a few games, and it can be, if it's snowflakes, knock off a couple in co-op or play some randoms and play boats that I either enjoy playing or feel that I could have a big influence on a match even as an individual player, or I can grab a couple buddies and play a 3-man div and really feel like we can have a huge influence on the game because there's three of us, and we balance out the way our div is and so on, and also have some social interaction. So the game has a lot of different facets available to people who want different things out of it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I don't think I can speak on this without being accused of bias, but I didn't put all this time into being part of a competitive clan and making a podcast and streaming and then join the company. It makes the game because I don't think the game is good. I honestly think the game is fantastic, and I've had my opinions about questionable choices as to the direction of the game before, but generally speaking, I think that things are very, very healthy, and it's still a lot of fun. I still log in every day and play, like without reservation. It's fun for me. And I feel like I should mention now that when I joined the company, I knew that there's a trap that I think a lot of players will fall into, and which is thinking that, okay, well, you're joining the company, now you can finally fix all those things that the player base hates, right? It's like, well, no, not exactly. But I can say that there's a certain amount of opportunity present, I think uniquely for me, or maybe for a few of the other players that have been hired. Seraphice on the EU server, who was one of the EU COTS coordinators, he was hired by Wargaming EU. I got to spend time with him when I was in Prague for COTS Internationals. Delightful young man. He's really smart, really good at what he does. I'm really looking forward to working on King of the Sea in the future with him. Our friend Oskants, who has been a frequent contributor on this podcast to talk about CVs and whatnot. He was in Clan KSC with Borla. He was previously in Clan TNG with Synpax and myself. He recently came on as...
He works for Wargaming now.
He is the new community manager in Wargaming Austin. Yeah.
Interesting.
I introduced him on stream last week. And... honestly, guys, I'm thrilled to have him, not only because he's a really, really nice human being, but he's very smart. I know that there have been a number of notable times when certain community members have had sort of long, drawn-out arguments with him, but, I mean, he's very smart, he's very analytical, and really, really good-hearted person. So I'm very pleased to be working with him and to have him help me do my job. So that I can start doing more fun things that I haven't really been able to get around to as I've had to do the work of a few people here for the last 2 months. So I'm excited for that, and I'm excited to see what kind of cool things I can have added to the game, because there is the opportunity for that. I will also say that Wargaming itself, not even just my region, but the other regions, have reached out to me specifically with sort of the acknowledgement of they know that I'm a pretty good player, and so they're interested to see what perspective I have on things. And I was floored. I was like, thank goodness! I'm so glad that this thing that I'm bringing to the table that might be unusual, can maybe help steer things in a good direction. So I'm very positive, and I'm very optimistic about what can happen. So yeah,
I'm very happy for you. I'm very happy for Oskant. Like you mentioned, he's one of the nicest human beings that I've encountered in this game, and have enjoyed hanging out with him as he's been in our group, and we're always going to be cheering him on. Obviously, him being a CV player primarily, and a lot of his content being around that, there's people who are frustrated with him, and people who disagreed with some of his takes, and I don't agree with absolutely everything he says, but if you're talking about just a good person who cares about the game, there's not many people who care more and are better people than he is.
Yeah, completely agree. Well, gentlemen, we've been talking for about an hour and 15 minutes. Is there anything to cover that we haven't covered?
Think anybody's still listening?
Well, Late Light's not. I know that.
Hey, are we still doing this?
Oh man, I think at one point or another, all three of us have in fact sunk a ship. I think throughout the episodes, each one of us has had the opportunity to do so. But I don't want to stop before we absolutely choose one because, things might have changed. The Hakuryu might not be the monster that it once was. The Petro might be sort of looming less large than it used to. What do you think? You think we could take a moment to sink a ship each?
Sure, why not?
Borla, you're first. Sink a ship.
Wow, this is a difficult one. The very first time I sunk a ship, it was the Yu Yang, because there had been the change. For those of you who don't remember, Yu Yang was pretty strong in some of the early clan battle seasons, and so they nerfed it into the ground, I think, when a more elegant solution would have been to change the holes and have one hole be radar and one hole be smoke, and allow the guns to be stronger on the smoke one and be more balanced. And I think I would probably change my answer. I'm not sure though. It would probably be the FDR still. I would probably switch to that just because in clan battles, when there's not a full 12 players to have their AA, and with the amount of influence CVs exert, I think the choice would have to be a tier 10 CV, and it would probably be that one over the Immelman, I think, just because there's no stopping those attacks early in the game when they're full planes and full squadrons of planes. And I typically play battleship and clan battles, and oftentimes you're a little bit of a static target. So torpedo bombs or something coming in, with the way the amount of torps that drop on that, there's really often no way to avoid taking at least some damage. So that would probably be my choice, I think, since I believe from the very beginning you guys ruled out the idea of a whole class, so I can't just nuke all the submarines before they pop in. So
I was going to say that,
yeah.
But we make the rules up as we go along. So, but
then subs, absolutely.
You want to nuke subs?
Yeah, I'm not a fan of them, but
I was going to say the same thing. Great minds, eh?
That's it. You're both off the podcast.
But if I do have to pick a ship, any different day I might give you a different answer. But just top of mind, probably Hayate.
Hayate? Why? You're such a hipster.
Because it's just a dog. It has no role in the game. I don't think it was thought through very well. I mean, usually, typically with ships of a certain class, you kind of hold them up against each other and you say, okay, this one has disadvantages, but this one has disadvantages over it, right? But when you hold it up against something like a Gearing or I don't know, Grozavoy or something like that, it does not have any advantage. It's all downsides compared to what advantages does it have over a Gearing? What real advantages does it have?
Yeah, fair enough, man.
It just doesn't belong in. It doesn't belong. It needs something done to it. That's what I'm getting at. And usually when I say a ship should be sunk, it's because it needs something done. Seattle, turret traverse. That's an old. We can go way back on that.
Oh
one.
yeah.
Yeah. Maybe I need to resuscitate that project because I haven't played the game a little bit lately.
That was your first ship sinking. The first time that you did it was you said the Seattle because of the turret traverse.
It's a bug. I don't think Wargaming was paying attention when they rolled that line out, and they accidentally made it lower than both the Cleveland and the Worcester, and that would do so much to save what is I would consider a ship that struggles. And you're the one with the access to the big spreadsheet and whatnot. It's an okay ship when you've got in your 3-man div, you got someone to smoke. It kind of works out, that. But just the lack of maneuverability, there's no reason that it should have a lower turret traverse than both the Cleveland and the Worcester. But now I'm thinking of different. But yeah, I'm going back to the Hayate because I just as soon have my 1 million or 2 million free XP back.
I see.
But it's a dog. There's no way around it.
So you're calling redundancy in this episode.
I'm calling just bad ships that need to be fixed. Hey, we all remember what Sub-Octavian sunk, right? Wasn't that a legendary choice you never would have expected? And his explanation is no different than my explanation.
Sunk the Khabarovsk, yeah.
The cab, right?
Didn't belong in the game. And And in fact, he did more or less sink it, right? It's going to be premium or something.
There are two Khabarovsk-esque ships that are sort of on the docket. I believe one is the super ship, the Zorky. It's a tier 10 Russian gunboat with, I think, if I'm not mistaken, with better than normal armor. And then there's the Delny, which is the one that is going to replace the Khabarovsk. And if I'm not mistaken, while we sit here, I'm going to look this up real quick so I don't make a fool of myself any further than I already have. I believe the Delny recently got Soviet destroyer Delny, maximum main battery firing range increased from 11.5 to 13.1. So that'll basically give it a similar firing range to the Tashkent rather than the 11.5, which is what the Khabarovsk, I believe, had originally. So that will fundamentally change the way that it plays.
Yeah, well, at the bottom line, though, long way of saying, the boss sunk. Not only did he say he would sink the ship, or say it was the ship to sink, he actually sunk it.
Yeah,
so
he kind of did it.
And I mean, when Sub Octavian says the ship needs to be sunk, you should short that stock real fast.
Yeah.
Because unlike me or you wanting to sink some arcane ship, he's got the authority. He actually has the nuke button on his desk.
Oh, I don't want to sink something arcane. I want to sink the Fen Yang. The Fen Yang has always been and will always be my least favorite ship in the game. I hate the Fen Yang. I hate the Fen Yang. I hate the Fen Yang. I hate everything about it. And that made it the absolute perfect ship to place in the category of things my Twitch stream viewers could spend channel points to make me play. I hated it. It's a clone of the Akazuki, but it's worse in every way except for AP pen angles and I think the Akazuki has 10-kilometer torpedoes. The Fen Yang has 12-kilometer torpedoes, but they're deep waters.
Deep water.
And they're not even deep waters. They're Asashio deep waters. They can only hit battleships and aircraft carriers. And they don't even do more damage than the Akazuki torpedoes. The HE literally can't even penetrate superstructure without taking IFHE. It's only for starting fires. It just drives me crazy.
Well, maybe you can do something about it.
Maybe. If only there was someone you could talk to.
God, if only we knew somebody who worked at Wargaming.
The sink the ship philosophies, because the reason for sinking a ship was as interesting as the ship, or more interesting than the ship they would sink. Because you get guys coming in here saying, "I want to sink the Stalingrad," because it's so powerful. Not even because it was powerful, but because of how it shifted how the game was played at competitive.
Right.
Or you get them, sinking the FDR because it's OP, or whatever. I don't recall.
Or the Petrol, or the Hakuryu, yeah.
Or straight up OP ships, sinking ships because they're dogs, shipping ships because they're just, or sinking the class of submarines because it's just radically different and boring, and kind of, I don't know. I don't want to get you in trouble here, but let's just say a lot of people are
perfectly allowed to have an opinion.
I know, but I can be. Well, let's just say. A lot of people raise questions about the inclusion of submarines in the game.
Yeah.
A diplomatic way to put it. Questions were raised.
I think they would be awesome in operations and other scenarios. I don't think it's going to be balanced in randoms or any other form. Like eventually, if they get to clan battles or COTS or anything like that.
Well, when they can shoot a ping as frequently as a battleship can hit the Damacon button, I think they'll be balanced.
I will say that I am looking forward to, hopefully, and I don't know if this is happening or not because I don't know everything, but I really do think it would be fun to have a convoy mode again where, let's say, a pack of 4 submarines attempts to sink a bunch of Liberty ships against, destroyer or cruiser escorts. I think that would be super fun.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Yeah. Some people might like that, and it wouldn't cause other people problems.
Yeah, I mean, the convoy mode was very well received. Like, lots of people enjoyed playing convoy mode. There's just something about trying to sink bots and somebody else trying to prevent you from sinking the bots. It's sort of fun. It was different. So I'm looking forward to seeing where maybe that can go in the future.
You want an innovation in the game? Because I know the reason submarines are here is really just to try to grow the game and expand it. Here's an idea you can work with, Boggzy. There should be ships that require 2 captains.
Huh. You mean like 2 players or 2 captains?
Well, 2 players, like a ship that requires 2 players. I mean, that's just something that I think Wargaming could explore. I'm just spitballing it, but it just occurred to me is that would be a way, or like a whole division, controlling one ship, and it's maybe too radically different from what the game is now and how it works, especially with how XP and ship lines work. But that's if they're just looking for novel ways, rather than just throwing another gimmick on like airstrikes or something. I think that would be something to explore, to think about. Or how about, because they always introduce these things in the alternative game modes. I mean, where do we see subs first? It was in that Halloween game mode, right? That's where they first showed up.
Yeah,
So like maybe a Halloween game
ago.
mode where you've got to be, where it's a single ship, where there's sort of seats, and maybe you can switch seats, and the different seats have different jobs.
That's interesting. I've always wondered what it would be like if AA was something that could be manually controlled, but...
That and secondaries and
or if you could turn your back guns independently from your front guns.
That would be interesting too. Yeah. Well, it's Fen Yang for me, gentlemen. Sorry, but I've suffered enough, and I'd like it gone.
Well, I mean, if you ever stream again, you ever do it again, you've just guaranteed what ship it's going to be every time you let the audience select.
Why do you think I turned the ship redemption off the last time I streamed?
Yeah, I was already wondering how many channel points I had and when the next time he would stream would be.
Well, anyway, you know what? Actually, that's an idea for a podcast because, what you do, I'm actually going to do this right now. In fact, we started doing this as a concept. How do you spell Fen Yang? Fen Yang, right?
Yeah, Fenyang.
Right. Well, this guy named Magadragon in Haifu has, he's made it work. And so his Quantum Rat and some guy in GGWLP, Velius, I think we know him. We've seen him around. So that's hey, Boggzy really hates this ship. So educate Boggzy on how to play the Fen Yang. We have Maku Dragon, server leader for that ship, and maybe he'd tell you some stuff that make you not hate it so much. I feel like we did that with certain ships where we brought in like the leaderboard, the guy at the top or near the top of the leaderboard to sort of explain how to use it.
Yeah, we did that with we had B-Ray from SCCC teach us how to Yoshino. We had IKX Blitz from KSC come in. I think he was TNG at the time. Come in and explain how to Lo Yang. I had Kelsier come in and explain how to Smoland, which was really interesting. He really made it clear and explained how you could have the cap contesting DD hunting Smoland with concealment and RPF, or you could have the PR damage farming Smoland with range mod and just full DPM. And he went through both builds and explained how to play. It was honestly really great. So, I mean,
there you go.
There are 2 podcasts out there that I can recall now that deal with warships. One is a podcast hosted by Griefer. He's a CC for NA. Griefer or Greifer, depending on how you pronounce it. It's Greifer. He's got a podcast that he recently began. There's still, of course, the EU podcast hosted by Statsbloke. That includes Painzor and Killerbin. So there are two podcasts out there still that you guys can listen to, and we highly encourage you both, not both, but you all to listen to both of them.
Greifer, he had me on the first episode. I was his first guest.
Oh, no kidding. That's great.
Yeah, and if you want to learn how to play Lo Yang specifically in ranked, Boggzy, you should talk to our mutual friend JGHC.
Is that right?
That's one of the last places that I saw him. He was in a Lo Yang running his hydro in smoke and got torped by a Tirpitz.
Ah, yes. Long range hydro and short range, really fast moving torpedoes. That was the surprise mofo Lo Yang play. That was a lot of fun.
No. He was torped by a Tirpitz.
Oh, dear. That's embarrassing.
Yeah.
Sorry,
good
Joe.
Times.
In a hydro destroyer?
Yes.
Yeah.
I feel like I've seen that happen in many ranked battles, but I'm glad that I'm not alone in hearing telltale of it.
There is nothing quite like torpedoing a destroyer in a battleship that has torpedoes. I'm proud to say that I have twice now torpedoed destroyers with my Constellation's torpedoes. It's a special kind of
Those
amazing.
are tricky ones. No, like there aren't enough Constellations out there.
Yeah.
And especially being a newer boat, there's people who are really, really surprised by the range on those torpedoes.
Yep, the range of the torpedoes, the accuracy of the guns. The armor is weak, yes, but if you know how to angle properly and you know your calibers and your AP overmatch, you can actually be much more survivable than you'd think. So don't be careful about over or underestimating the Constellation. But gentlemen, I don't know that I have anything else really left to say. Is there anything either of you wanted to get out before we wrap up?
This is intended to be the final episode.
Yeah.
I don't like that.
Okay.
I would like to continue this podcast. My schedule has changed recently. I've actually been able to play a little bit more Warships. I actually played Clan Battles for the first time last night for a couple of. I'd really like to continue this thing. It's like a once a week, maybe an hour podcast. I could record it on a Sunday night and just bring on a guest and chit chat about World of Warships. Sometimes it's patch notes, maybe sometimes the anthropological stuff, but it doesn't seem like, I don't know. I would like to continue it.
I have no objection to that. I'd be happy to facilitate a transition of power as you transitioned.
Well, I need your guys' permission. It's yours. I mean, it's yours. Does that sound?
I have no objection to it continuing. If it was a thing where it was on a Sunday night, I might be able to help support that. We could have that conversation later. I think the way Boggzy and I were doing it before was not sustainable for either of us because it was always so flexible based on our guest, and we were doing episodes, in a Tuesday morning and a Wednesday afternoon, and hey, can you do it tomorrow at this time, and that sort of thing. But I always enjoyed doing it. I would want to make sure that, and I guess part of my thing was I did almost none of this work behind the scenes.
I just show up.
I just showed up and had an idea of what we were going to talk about, and I did try to prep if it was a specific guest and know a little bit about them and speak intelligently about that, but I didn't do any of the scheduling, or I think I found one or two guests ever, maybe three at the most. So I was just the pretty face. Boggzy was the worker.
Because I actually in the real world. I'm kind of in a space where it would just be nice to be able to do something where it's okay to make jokes, and obviously it would be purely continue the history being completely apolitical, non-political, completely not controversial. I mean, there was that one episode we beat up on the guys who wanted to do the CV boycott.
No, you beat up on the guys who wanted to do the CV boycott.
It was so much fun. I felt. I mean. The thing is, I, on one hand, I disagreed with the idea of the CV boycott, but the boycott.
I picked up on that.
Yeah,
the reason, no, but the thing is that it doesn't really. If you want to boycott because they're CVs, boycott. If you don't. It's fine. But I think that what they were attempting to do was put a lot of pressure and to denigrate those who didn't want to go along with their boycott. Particularly when clan leaders were trying to decide who were in a precarious position, where it's like, hey, do I want to try to get all my guys here to agree to not do something we've always done before because some others, we're not really passionate about it? Because I think that you get this in echo chambers where you just assume that everybody agrees with you. And yeah, in fact, let's even say a preponderance of folks at that time did not like CVs, and I actually like CVs and clan battles, and I know that's a minority position, but do you hate CVs and clan battles enough to not play clan battles, right? And that threshold for many people was not met, and the assumption was made that it should meet it. And if you're not with us, you're basically part of the evil empire, and there's where your clan is going to kind of be shunned. We're going to have your members put pressure on you as a leader for not doing it, and all this. It was just a very the position they had put themselves in. As well as being, as many happen in historically, denigrative towards TNG in general. That's like, but I do. You got to have respect to those guys for at least coming on. But yeah, that was probably the most different of all the episodes we ever did, because that was one where we basically, it was. I would say it tilted towards adversarial, whereas everything else
Yeah.
is like, oh, you got a weird opinion. Well, that's cool. Yeah, tell us more about it. How did you arrive at that? Oh,
Right.
wait, like
That was the single deliberate gotcha episode.
Yeah.
Well, no, well,
I don't think
I
those
didn't
guys were
know that.
ready to be confronted. So they weren't. They were there to have talking points, but they weren't there to really think through. They weren't there to really think through the significance of all of it and defend it point by point. And you're a very smart guy. You're very analytical, and you were prepared to take apart their arguments point by point. And
I didn't make an assumption that I didn't make an. I slightly disagree with. I mean, it came off as gotcha, but I did not. Gotcha is where like you get. Let's say you get some public figure on, and they say, "Yeah, I've always been loyal to my wife." And then you like flash in their face. Well, we have these photos of you leaving a private apartment.
You
with
are
an
not the
escort.
father.
Yeah, I mean that's the true. Whereas,
Right.
like, if I had no reason to believe that they could not answer a question as, "Hey, how many clans are participating in the boycott?" Like that kind of stuff. So, whatever. But
Sure, yeah.
I don't know how we got on that, but that just going back to hey, you made up a clan because you're all fans of Star Trek. Oh, and you have a leadership structure, and you live stream with you all in your uniforms, and you use Star Trek lingo while you play clan.
Send
Oh,
in
that's
the guy
really
in
cool.
the red uniform and the destroyer to go
Yeah.
spot the enemy.
Yes. That's the kind of that, along with obviously patch note conversations and hey, you guys just won COTS, or tell us about your tough season, or or the roundtables with the champs. Those are the kinds of things that are also kind of interesting.
Yeah, those are a lot of fun.
Yeah, like I'll be honest with you, when I stepped away from the game, I missed a lot of things, but one of the things I really did miss most was doing the podcast with you. It's just because it was it was like the eye in the storm, eye in the eye of a hurricane, where it's basically surrounded by complete turmoil in every direction. But you got this, it's time to do a podcast with Boggzy. So everything stops around it, and it's just this moment of, we're just going to talk about some boats.
We're gonna let our fantasies in our imaginations go a little bit and just kind of wrap themselves around this game that we like, which is based on lore that we like, World War history and whatnot, and it's just fun to sort of wrap your mind up into it and let yourself be a kid in a way about.
We're just going to pretend for an hour like the whole world isn't burning down around us. Yeah. And we're going to talk about this pixel boat casino. Like, yeah. Oh, that's cool. So the Shikishima, even bigger guns than Yamato. How about that?
Yep, that's right. Really, 510. Wow, what is that overmatch? Let's talk about it. 35. Well, I guess that's only the Riga. I don't see that as a useful and competitive, but meow meow meow. It's. But the gun sounds. That's worth the steal just for the gun sounds. That sort of thing.
Yep. Oh, you're starting a clan where you're all furries. Interesting. So you wear like tiger print camos. Hey, can they get some tiger print camos in the game? Can we help them out, Boggzy, the furry clan?
I'll do my best for the furries, because the furries just suffer so much.
They're right behind the bronies. He's got to get the brony camos out there first.
Yeah.
When's that coming? That crossover, My Little Pony crossover.
Yeah. I have to. Are they owned by Mattel? I'm not sure. I'll have to investigate.
I think they are. So Transformers and My Little Pony, something for the ladies.
What I was thinking, like I was spitballing the other day with some people about like what would be fun. Just what are some fun what are some fun things that could be added to the game just as artistic endeavors? Like free or not free, but like premium camos or things like that. And this is so stupid, but like I'd love it if there were like a Western themed camo that you could put on to like an American cruiser or battleship or something, where like the barrels of your ship turn into like basically like revolver barrels or something like that.
Big saloon doors on the side.
Yeah, like just silly things. I don't know why. There's a camo, a permanent camo that some of you guys may have forgotten about for the Atlanta, and it's like palm trees. There are palm trees on the Atlanta.
I've not forgotten about that one, Boggzy,
there is sand,
and we'll never let you forget.
There is sand on the deck.
I will never forget the sound of disgust in Synpax's voice.
And beach towels, guys. Beach towels on my Atlanta. And I just think it's delightful.
Yeah, they do some cool weird, like the Kobayashi Maru camo with the beer can. Was that really supposed to be a beer can, or was this that?
No, it's supposed to be a Pope hat.
Did they just say to him, "Hey, just do whatever the hell you want"? And he came back with that, and they're like, "Oh, okay."
I'm not sure. Does it
The
say
Roma,
Peroni on it?
wasn't it? The Roma.
It was the Roma.
Yeah, the
Yes,
Roma.
absolutely.
I think stuff like that would be fun. I also thought about, like, I had asked, hey, what are the odds we could do a James Bond crossover for the release of the James Bond movie? But it does take some time to get these things in place, and there was no time for that. Pun to anybody who caught that the Bond movie was called No Time to Die. But like, I thought it would be super interesting to have like a tuxedo themed camo where like the ship gets wrapped up in black and white, and maybe there's a martini sitting on the boat somewhere, and then when you fire the guns, it sounds like a silenced pistol. It's just like silly things like that. I think would be fun little integrations into the game, but those sort of
Well, I'm
things
surprised.
really do
I'm
take
surprised you
time.
didn't do something with Ghostbusters when that came out, because I mean, you could imagine like an Ecto One themed camo or a special camo for a ship. I was really impressed by the Transformers stuff.
They really
And
are cool.
I grew up with G1. I'm a Generation X, so that was, to me, it just sort of tickled a little bit of that nostalgia.
Wait a minute. No, you're not. You're an elder millennial, just like I am, aren't you?
Well, look, if you go to Wikipedia, technically my birth year is the year of 78, which they will say that's millennial. But I mean, I think all of my cultural references and understanding is squarely with the greatest generation in the history of mankind, which is Gen X.
Gen X.
And always, we don't whine as much. We don't feel as entitled. We don't live on our cell phones. We appreciated, although I didn't, but now we say we appreciated fine bands like Nirvana, and it was a very different era.
Okay, boomer.
You got me.
Yeah.
You'd be outvoted on this, Boggzy, because Synpax and I are the same age, so sorry.
God damn it. Well,
I'm a little bit bigger of a fan of Pearl Jam, as my KSC guys know.
Yeah, all those
Nirvana,
guys.
but I like them both, yeah.
Yeah, the grunge stuff. I hated Nirvana when it came out, but now when I hear it, it's like, oh, this is pretty good. Pretty good.
you should call Kurt and let him know that you really like his music.
Oof.
Oof.
Mm.
That's the level, gentlemen. That's the level.
See, and that's why we can't end the podcast with this episode.
Because of that joke.
We cannot go out on that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I am more than happy to see the podcast continue. It's just not something that I can effectively do myself anymore. So I'm happy to talk about it with you guys and figure out a way to make something like that happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's pretty low maintenance. Do we have an intro music?
Oh yeah, I'll send you all my assets.
Well, I'm just saying, like, okay, forgive me, but I don't think I've listened to any episodes. I've just been too busy. So I don't know if you've got. I do remember Bree doing some wonderful voice work, and the ads, and we were doing the sort of comical ads, which I thought were great.
Yeah,
too,
for a while I was doing that. I was making fake ads because you and I actually had real ads that were from Anchor, and then those ran out. So I started making fake ones, which were creatively a lot of fun.
Some of them were glorious.
Yeah, they were a lot of fun to do. Some of them were stupid, but some were really fun. I had Brianna do onlymercs.com when mercs were entering the game, which honestly I think that the mercenary function has been a wonderful addition to the game as a clan guy. Being able to have folks from subclans come in and hop into your div is great.
I was gonna say, I think it's instead of helping the smaller groups, it's helped the bigger groups more.
It might have, yeah. But yeah, I did one for the 12 Days of Warships. It was a joke on the 12 Days of Christmas, and it ended with Anna Makarov for everyone because it was right around that Santa Crate time from last year. Yeah, there were some fun ones to do, but again, that was just more production time. I had to find a song or find a thing. I always had to find music to underlay to it to make it sound like a commercial.
Well, I mean, this podcast, and also to me, and it's without, and probably for you too, it's also just a vessel for comedy.
Yeah.
I mean, because honestly, you may have caught, but sometimes it got the conversations got a little boring, and to me, that was just a bait to start misbehaving and asking weird questions, just to, to me, the greatest sin is to be boring, and but the antidote to boredom is humor, and I don't know. It was always like a play, especially in fact some of the best parts, the parts that seemed to end too quickly was always the opening banter. Was always something really funny and stupid. I don't know if you recall it that way, but
I mean, yeah, usually we'd talk sort of about what was going on and then find some way of taking it to the extreme in some way for comedy's sake. But yeah, I mean, I thought we tried to and struck a good balance of, informative, and funny at times. I liked that, generally speaking, when you and I started at Synpax, there was the differential between you, who knew the community, knew the clans, and knew the game better, and then me, who at the time was new to competitive and didn't know the power players in the clan world or what have you. So oftentimes I would ask the questions that a listener who didn't know the game as well might be apt to ask, and then you could have the more complicated, more in-depth questions covered.
well, and here you are, all grown up now.
I'm a big boy, finally. I'm 5'6", 5'7". I don't know how the joke about me being short. I'm 5'10", everybody. I don't know how the joke of me being short got started. I think it's because Late Light is actually 6'8", and just this joke happened that I'm unusually small. It's not true.
It was a combination. I think it started with Late Light, and then you kind of leaned in when I got a dog that was bigger than you.
Oh, that's right. The dog was bigger than me. This one has not, like, the guys in Europe, when I went to COTS 13, when I went to Prague, Czech Republic, to host COTS 13, they were making jokes about how short I was. It was so pervasive, and it cropped up in places that I never would have thought. You know what? Because, like, literally, I walked in the door to the Prague office. They're all really tall. Like, the only one who was my height was Chrysantos. Chrysantos is my height. Everyone else is, like, over 6 feet tall. And I just went, well, shit. Like, now I actually do feel small. And then they all sort of laughed and said, yeah, we heard you were like 5'3". And I was like, no, I'm not 5'3", I'm 5'10". They were all very surprised that I wasn't shorter. Across the ocean.
Yeah.
But, well, gentlemen, I would love, I think it'd be fantastic if Synpax, you wanted to carry the torch for the podcast, and we can definitely talk about the details of that.
Sure. I'd love to talk about it and see if we can, because it's just such a, I mean, I haven't listened to the other guys' podcast, but there was a podcast actually preceding ours. I was a guest on it, I recall, with the 07 guys. I think they,
BFK and Bison.
do you recall that? Yeah, I think so. It was definitely BFK and somebody else. And they tried to, but I think that I don't know, I think part of the challenge for them continuing it was because they tried to make every episode be like a huge, big, important episode. And it's hard to sustain that in, again, a pixel built casino game.
Yeah.
But if you just take the adage, let's look at, let's get the best player in the server in the Fen Yang, and he's going to talk a little bit about it and how to master that dog or whatever. It's not block, but look, it's stuff you listen to on a long drive or when you're on the lawnmower or the snowblower, depending on the season, and just that level of interest. Hey, and you guys, when I was looking up the old episodes of the podcast, seeing, just to refresh my memory, the little podcast tracker says that it's in the top 10% of podcasts around the world.
What?
Yep.
Wow.
What?
Well, it's basically because there are a lot of crummy podcasts with no audience. I mean, there's
a lot of people who
of
only listen to themselves.
Something like that, but still top 10%.
You got to be kidding me. Did you just go to Anchor and look at that, or?
No, it's on some other. I looked up Get to Know World of Warships podcasts, and I think the link was on Listen Notes, and at the top it has the listen score and the global rank top 10%.
No kidding.
You got something else for your resume, Boggzy?
I guess so. What's interesting is that the podcast itself is released on I released it on my YouTube when I was streaming because that helped my YouTube channel, and so I'd release it on Anchor, which was just the podcast, and then I'd post the video of it on YouTube. And actually, the YouTube started to take over as more popular, as a more popular listening point than Anchor did. So it's sort of interesting that if we ended up making top 10% with just what's on the Anchor thing, then it might even be higher than that. I don't know, that feels good to know. I always sort of thought it was a fun little thing that helped us both do something else.
Well, yeah, sure. But the Anchor, also, I think that the Anchor does not necessarily reflect the number of plays on the Apple platform, because I think that Apple copies the audio over, so it doesn't count every time somebody on Apple listens to it. And I think Apple is one of the bigger podcast platforms. I could be mistaken about that, but regardless, it's something.
Yeah, that is
It's something.
That is definitely something. Wow. Well, there you go, man. I'm not sure I have anything else other than just to say thank you to everybody who has come back and listened to our show and has made our show actually, something to be proud of and something that, got me a job. So, let's say thank you to everybody.
Yeah, and I really appreciate, both of you guys for getting this started, Boggzy for allowing me to join in, and then the listeners that were interactive with us. Like I mentioned earlier in the podcast, there were lots of times where I would be playing and somebody would make a comment about something they enjoyed or give a suggestion or just a shout out. And it's kind of nice in the community. And Boggzy, you and I had talked about this, a big part of why I wanted to be involved, aside from the portion of me that likes talk radio and thought I would like to kind of dabble in a format like this, was we all like the community. And that's a big part of what this game brings to, I think, each of us, is the communities that we're involved in. And it was a way to give back or to interact with the community. And I think lots of people benefited along the way when we talked about patch notes, understanding what was going on. They learned about specific clans. I think I always felt like, especially as we got into our episodes, Boggzy, that the audience we had was probably the Storm clans and the clans that were barely making Typhoon, and those types of people actually did learn some things along the way that helped some of their clans. And I know I had people make comments about that, to them just hearing how other people ran things, or hearing about you and I riff on some of the things that were going on, or experiences we were having in clan battles or with our groups. And so it was kind of nice to be able to get some interaction with the audience and have some people take notice and know that there was at least a fair amount of people who listened and paid attention and were entertained by it. So thank you guys for putting this together and allowing me to be a part of it.
I do have an exit question. I feel like this exit question has to be asked. What was your favorite episode?
I'm torn between three. I really liked I think it was the first CV roundtable we did. That's where or maybe it was either this first CV roundtable or maybe it was the first COTS internationals, the ones where we got people from all servers. There's that one. There's the sub-Octavian one, because that was sort of our high watermark in terms of like, oh wow, look who we got. Here's the highest effect on taking information from one place and distributing it outwards that I think we were able to do. And then the last one was Chrysanthos. I just loved doing Ghosts of Warships Past, and the fact that we did it twice because I ruined the first one made it even better. But I might actually go with that one, Ghost of Warships Past, because it was so interesting to talk about things that used to be normal in the game that are now, looking back, we go, oh my God, that used to be normal? And it's sort of it's hard to appreciate the quality of life adjustments that sort of trickle into the game, just because when they happen, you go, oh, thank God that's fixed. And then you just sort of move on as if it's normal. So looking back and going, oh, right, stealth firing used to be a thing. And
You get shot by a battleship and would get a flood from it.
yeah. Or DDs used to have citadels,
Or battleship would shoot you from smoke and you can't spot him.
Yeah, 2 kilometers away, the battleship shoots from smoke and you can't see it.
Borla.
Yeah, my obvious answer was going to be the Chrysanthos episode that Boggzy never recorded. I think
I recorded it. I just corrupted the file.
Yeah, he corrupted that never got we redid it, and it was a top-notch episode. I felt like that day we were both on, and Chrysanthos was on, and that was kind of like the $1 million quartet musical thing that everybody legend has it. This happened and that happened. That was the legendary podcast.
Yeah.
Selfishly, I also liked the first time that you had Torino and I on as guests. That was a nice little. I remember Synpax, you specifically asked me, and I thought you sounded intrigued by my answer. Like, would I give everything up for my name on the map? Like, to get KSC's name on the map, because we were talking about sustainability and, hey, a year and a half, 2 years from now, I still want to be with the same group of guys and still being in the top, 10 or whatever. And so listening back to that episode a few times, I'm really proud of our guys and what we've been able to sustain. We haven't got our name on the map, but we did win COTS NA, and we've been up in the top 2 or 3 a bunch of times the last several seasons. So, but it's been a good time. But that Chrysanthos one was the best episode I think we had. So I know Boggzy felt sick about it, but we did a really, really good second take on that one.
Yeah. Well, what about you, Synpax? What was your favorite episode?
Well, obviously episode 50, which was Get to Know Synpax. Best episode ever. No, okay, but no, I would say my favorite episode was probably the one that you just don't get to do this often, but it was the one with lovely Saratoga after Wargaming deleted his clan.
The second interview with UMRR.
And the fact that he would even do that, and I remember the emails going back and forth trying to set it up, but it was a short episode. I'm looking at it; it's only 33 minutes, but that I think we just sort of plunged the depth of humanity, more so than we ever got into anything. I don't know, and it wasn't. It was a very serious kind of, because it also you sort of learned about Chinese culture and the way they perceive the world over there, and how that clashed with Wargaming's governing philosophy of how they operate the business. And that, I think that one was probably the
because it was basically him defending it by saying that he had guys who were making their living or giving the money that they needed for their families and to stay in school or whatever by playing the game for money, right? Wasn't that kind of just?
I wouldn't say that he used the word defend. He seemed
explained it.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, that was kind of his take on it, and it was just his willingness to completely admit to it, did not deny it. Said he did not argue with the outcome of it. He didn't say it was unjust or anything like that. But he said, "Look, I mean, it's just." His humility of it really struck me, because that is unique. I think that, having dealt with a lot of folks from that part of the world, that culture, you don't often get to see that, and also just in a game like this among super elite players, you also don't get to encounter that as much as you might expect, or you don't expect it. It's just it was just. The humility of him was just something that I can't forget, more so than anything specifically that he said.
Yeah, just the fact that he wasn't bitter or spiteful or petty. He just said, "Yeah, we did this, and here's the reason." And
Yeah.
I think he even said that if he were wargaming, he would also if he were wargaming, he would absolutely have disbanded their clan. I mean, it was like, oh, okay.
But is that was a really if you want to look at it in terms of what the podcast can contribute, say, to the community, in things that Wargaming can't really do that interview, they
Right.
can't. They can't do. I think that's where the podcast really reached a new level of. I don't want to use the word journalism, but I feel like there's no other. That's where we really hit a real breakthrough in terms of meaningful journalism, at least insofar as this make believe world we're all participating.
Sure, right.
That was it sort of breaks the fourth wall a little bit. You know what I'm saying? More so than, and I think that is a fact after the episode with PWP responding to cheating accusations, which is also a very cool episode too. And that newbie Dash guy, he was like a great PR officer.
Pretty
for that
slick,
clan.
wasn't he?
That was really good. That was really good. But
Yeah.
that's yeah. So that one probably is seared in my mind. Is probably the one I was most excited to do, the one I thought was most interesting, and the one that I guess for me at least was the one that I learned the most from.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It's a great way to put it. Wow. Well, feels a little bittersweet, but I think that's it from Team Boggzy. I think
Well, you have to come back and be a guest from time to time, right?
Oh boy, would I love to!
There.
Yeah, I would absolutely.
It's always a goodbye for now, right?
Today we have Wargaming's community manager, Boggzy.
Boggzy.
I'm gonna hold his feet to the fire for everything that's wrong with the game.
Would you please? Someone suggested to me recently that I could get in front of a lot of things by just saying, just remember, guys, that if there's ever anything wrong in the game that you particularly don't like, #blame Boggzy. That's the right way to think about things. So, #blame Boggzy. You don't like subs? #blame Boggzy. You don't like that you can still detonate as a mechanic? #blame Boggzy.
I've heard that's fun and engaging.
It is. It's fun and engaging to blame me. So blame me. That's fine. But all right. Well, I guess this is for now. This is the current crew of the SS Get to Know World of Warships signing off. It has been a pleasure from my end to entertain you or bore you, whatever it happened to be at the time. Borla, it's been a pleasure to be a co-host to you. Synpax, it was a pleasure to be a co-host to you. And if this is something that you continue, you have my full endorsement and full support.
Thanks, guys. It's been fun.
Yep, it's been a real joy.
Wonderful. Well, and again, thank you to the audience, to anybody listening. We hope this has been helpful to you. Hope this has made you feel better, and hope maybe it's made you think about the game in different ways at different times. So, once again, this has been Get to Know World of Warships. We'll see you guys later.